Well, to start out, do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to become a writer?
Yeah, I grew up in South Dakota. Um, I read a lot growing up, like in grade school and middle school. I pretty much always had a book in my hand. And then in high school, got a little more interested in girls and stopped reading as much. And then in college, I maybe read one book leisurely in college and then rediscovered my love for it afterwards
Cool.
when I graduated. But mostly, yeah, I've always loved stories, movies. I like kind of like those grand epic adventures and things like that. And I've always had little stories in my head. Like even as a kid, I would scribble like little drawings and stuff and write like
Yeah.
children's books that only my mom would read. But
Eh, you got to start
who
somewhere. I
knows?
feel like I
Yeah.
did the same thing.
Yeah. And then a few years ago, I kind of self-published a group of short stories.
Okay.
Yeah, and from there, I decided to tackle something a little bigger, and then came Mankind.
Cool. Awesome. So, how you've lived in South Dakota your whole life then?
Hmm.
Cool. Went to
Yep.
school there and everything?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So, I don't know what your short stories were like with your short story collection, but with Mankind, it's a cli-fi story. What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, I didn't wake up wanting to be a champion for climate change.
I feel like
Yeah,
most people probably are like that.
I started this. I had the story, like kind of the general story in my head,
Mm-hmm.
but it just kind of evolved over time. Let's see. When I started writing it, I kind of had the idea that I had like this young girl and this lady who rescues her, and then they go on
Mm-hmm.
this big journey. But I always like watched movies or read books about like the end of the world. And it
Yeah.
always was like one of three things. You had like the atomic bomb wiped everyone out, some random disease, or
Mm-hmm.
zombies. And
Yeah.
I think those had kind of been not played out, but I didn't have like an interesting way to approach that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a way to like wipe out humanity. And what's more close to home than like kind of
Yeah.
the climate disaster we're living through now. So
Cool.
yeah. Um, so yeah, and then yeah, as I just kind of wrote it and I had to come up with like some interesting ideas, I just kind of as you watch the news or go outside, you notice things are changing and
Mm-hmm.
really I think it would hit a little closer to home.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
What were some of like the, I guess, early disaster types of movies or books that you read growing up that maybe had kind of an influence on this?
The two big ones, you'd probably look at Mad Max Fury Road, which came out
Okay.
like in 2013. But I remember
Yeah.
going to the theater and seeing that and then coming out and like, whoa, I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was so wild. It was limited in backstory, but they made it clear like water was power and everything was
Mm-hmm.
violent and hectic and there was these big sandstorms. It was just a wild ride. And I kind of
Yeah.
wanted to do it with Mankind, kind of like get that vibe, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term.
Yeah. Sure.
It's dog eat dog out there when there's little water and food.
Yeah. Definitely.
And then another one was The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Okay. Cool.
Um,
I've read that.
yeah, great book. And he made it so he didn't really describe in the book like what happened. I mean, he mentioned like
Yeah.
fires a couple times, so you can
Mm-hmm.
assume it was probably bombs or war.
Yeah.
But the way he writes was so beautiful, and he
Yeah. He's an amazing writer.
yeah, he comes up with these incredible like metaphors. Like he had one where it was like a cloudy day and the sun was going over and he likened it to
Mm-hmm.
like an old lady holding like a lantern
Yeah.
over. I was like, what? How does he think of this? But
Uh-huh.
but he
Yeah.
made
He's
it,
brilliant.
yeah, he made that like dystopian place seem in a way like kind of beautiful or like
Mm-hmm.
um and then he also I kind of mimicked him. He didn't really use chapters in that book. He just kind of went
Yeah, I
Just
remember that.
followed the boy and the man on the sections, and I really liked that, and it
Yeah.
saves a little bit of paper too. But
Sure. Yeah. Man, it's been a really long time since I read that book. That might have been like one of the first, I guess, like true dystopian books that I remember reading, which is like a really intense one to start with.
yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, I think I was maybe like a freshman or sophomore in high school when I read that.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I just remember being like, oh my God, like this is really graphic in a lot of parts. It's very violent. They made a movie out of it too, I think, didn't it? They wasn't Viggo Mortensen in
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty true to the book.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they kind of kept the same feeling with it. Yeah.
Cool. Gotcha.
Um, yeah, and a lot of like growing up with like young adult books, you either kind of went
Mm-hmm.
like space science fiction or like fantasy or like
Yeah.
some magical thing. So yeah, climate fiction, I'm sure it's had its hands in like popular works, but it really is
Yeah.
kind of a newer genre
Yeah,
or
definitely.
subgenre.
Mm-hmm. So your book is set in the future. I don't actually know if it ever really says when. It's kind of ambiguous, like you were saying, like the road and Mad Max are, but it takes place in Colorado, or what is now Colorado. I guess it's not really so much Colorado anymore. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a climate change aspect of it where, water is super scarce, and you do have these like intense dust storms that, can kill people. But then also, one of the like central themes of the book is that people are infertile in this future.
Mhm.
And we don't really find out, I guess, until about like halfway through the book, if I remember correctly. So what inspired you to take that angle with it as opposed to just like the water scarcity?
Um, growing up, we had family in Leadville, Colorado. So
Mm-hmm.
all of the locations in the book, I've been to personally.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I've traveled to them, and there's a couple I haven't gone to, but I know the
Mm-hmm.
area. And so that was
Sure.
always a place that I like had a deep fondness in my heart, and I knew how to describe. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's why I picked Colorado,
Yeah.
Denver over the Rocky Mountains. Let's see. And then, yeah, I picked that location, and then I knew that it would be dry. So like
Mm-hmm. It already is kind
basically,
of dry.
yeah. So basically,
Yeah.
everything's hot and dries out, and
Mm-hmm.
what you're gonna get is not necessarily rainstorms, but you'll get windstorms. So you get
Yeah.
so these violent storms pass through that they have to think about hiding from. And then with the water scarcity, I did a little bit or a lot of research on like where you would find
Yeah.
it, because
Okay,
obviously
cool.
you can't
I was
just,
wondering about that.
yeah, you can't pop by to the river. So the characters, they have to be creative, and so they have to well, there's a few chapters where they go into like houses and they have to bust
Yeah.
open old water pipes or check the tops of toilets.
Yeah, I was about to say the toilets.
Yeah, yeah, which sounds gross, but I mean, you got to drink
uh
water. So,
yeah, it's that or die, I guess. So
right, right. Yeah. And then as far as with the infertility part,
mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I know it's kind of inferred right away. I kind of open with a bang that there's like this character
Yeah.
that's really pivotal to the story. And then over time, I wanted the reader to think like, why is this person so important anyways? Like, why is everyone, fighting and dying for this person?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I do the reveal, you find out that there's, well, plastic, which we'll talk about,
Yeah.
which is the big cause of that infertility.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. What kind of research did you do for, I know you mentioned some of the research for like where you would find water, but what was some of the reading that led you to plastic?
It was really random. I think I subscribed to how you subscribe to a newsletter and you get them in your
Yeah.
email every month or every day sometimes.
It feels like it's every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I used to subscribe. This is a roundabout story. I just used to
No,
subscribe to
fine.
GQ.
Uh-huh.
I like got the magazine for a year, and I just never unsubscribed from the mailing list. And then one day I got an email, and I'm like, all right, I'm unsubscribing from this. But like in the email, and this is right when I was thinking about this story, in the email was this story called Sperm Count Zero. And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So before unsubscribing, I clicked on that and I read it. And it was pretty like haunting. And it's something that's not really talked about. And I think that's sort of on purpose, but there was basically these researchers are finding that every other generation of men, so like my grandfather, I most likely have 50% of the amount of sperm as he has, and so forth. And it'll just kind of keep continuing on that trend.
Great.
Yeah. And then there's still like millions and millions of sperm in there, but it's just, that's a fast rate of decline.
Yeah.
But and then they explained, the cause is most likely or almost definitely microplastics getting in the human body. And basically what those do is they get in your body and like the most rudimentary way to describe it is they like kind of block certain things from talking to other things. So so the part and it happens in females too, where they're born with fewer eggs, things like that.
Oh, okay.
Your body, there's just a bunch of like little pieces of plastic blocking your receptors or neurons, or I'm not the scientist, but
well, you're fine.
But then from there, I went on and do more research because I was like, oh, well, I've got to be able to describe this in a way that's not like shaming the reader, and I got to describe this in a way where it makes sense and in a way that like where people can understand it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. I've been reading a little bit about that since I finished reading your novel, and I was like, oh, great. Like another thing to be freaked out about. Not like saying that, your novel is doing something bad, but I was like, it's good that I know about this now.
Totally.
Because, I've heard people talk about like, obviously if you go to like Target or something like that, if you ever buy like a refillable water bottle, they'll like all the more expensive ones will always be like BPA free, like no phthalates or whatever. I think that's how you pronounce that.
Yeah, it's a weird word. Like, so PHTH, phthalates, or however you want to say it.
Ugh, I can't say that.
So that's like, those are the chemicals that the human body does not like. And those are in plastic. So like, just for those who don't know, like there's, when you pull crude oil out of the ground, you have two products. You make gasoline, and then the byproduct they make plastic with. And phthalates are in the plastic.
Okay.
So there was that big motion, was it early 2000s, where like you'd even see it on the news, like everything's BPA free now, your Tupperware, things like that.
Yeah.
And then it kind of disappeared, like just Tupperware and bottles being BPA free, like fixed the issue, but it didn't. And one thing I actually read recently, sorry to paint this horrible picture, but
no, let's do it.
one thing I read recently is people who work retail are exposed to more BPA than most because of the receipt paper.
Okay, I remember reading that.
Yeah, so it's even if they get rid of some of those phthalates out of our things that we drink and eat out of, we're still interacting with them every day because there's no regulation on like plastic-based non-consumables,
Ugh. Okay. Yeah, I've even seen it like advertised on like shampoo bottles, like phthalate free or whatever. So it's like in everything, it seems. So it really makes you think.
And it's important, depending on how much of a rabbit hole you want to dive into. Like BPA is not the only bad one, but
one of the
bad ones.
Gotcha. Cool.
A great
cool, I guess, but
a great thing about microplastics that's really accessible, and I listed at the end of the book under resources, is the Netflix show Dirty Money. It's a cool like docuseries. And each episode's a different topic, but I forget what the title of it is. But it's about like this raw material plastic manufacturer in Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
Point Comfort is the episode, but they found that like everyone in that town is heavily affected by these like granules and microplastics dumped into the water of this manufacturing company.
God. Yeah, man, you love to see it. That's awful. Yeah, I've seen that show like come up on my watch list. I just haven't watched it yet, so I'll have to check that out for sure. There's like a couple documentaries I need to watch.
Yeah, Dirty Money is great if you want to be in a bad mood for a couple hours.
Well, I'm sold. Like, let's go watch it. Yeah.
But the beauty is each episode's like a different topic, so you can be mad about a lot of different things.
There's so many different ways to be mad. Yeah. Okay, great. So at least there's some diversity. Switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to talk about the dedication of your book. So at the beginning, in the dedication, it says, "For every strong woman in my life," and there's a lot of really strong female characters in the book. Obviously Juno, who I guess you'd call the protagonist, the girl that you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. There's her. There's Lexa. She's kind of the strong woman who comes and rescues Juno. So those are just two of them, but there's some others. So, and then I guess like, converse to that, or on the opposite side of things, most of the men in the novel are like bad guys, and they're pretty horrible. With the exception of a few people, but like by and large, most of them are awful. So I was just wondering, like, what led to your decision in framing the book that way? If there is anything you wanted to mention on that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, it's not as sinister as it sounds, but with the men being evil. But like growing up, like during my like early pivotal childhood years, I was raised by my mom and my godmother. Mm-hmm. And it was just, they both had jobs. My mom worked at a law firm. My godmother was a sheriff deputy here in South Dakota. So naturally, in my head, like everyone was equal all the time. They just they're like, well, they're the ones that raised me. It's all the same. And and it's bizarre. Like even at this age now, I can't even, like, my mind doesn't comprehend like women being paid less or all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I can't calculate it. I'm like, well, they're all the same. I don't know. But and then along with my friends, even nowadays, myself included, we're all married to women with advanced degrees that have great jobs, and more often than not are like the breadwinners and things like that. So it's I don't, with the men, I feel like they've kind of had their day in the sun, you know, like pretty much every book up to like a certain year, like 2000.
Like almost all of them, yeah.
Yeah. And so as far as making the women good and the men evil, I just thought it was more interesting. I didn't think the story would be able to stand on 2 feet if it was a man rescuing a young boy who had to go, you know, fight a bunch of other men, and then it's just the same thing that's been written. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and so it's not really as sinister. I think that just, you know, the men, and especially like the old white men, we've had our day in the sun, and it's time to be more interesting, more relevant, and it was. So it's not quite as sinister as I thought. I'm not like, oh, men are evil.
Oh yeah, and I didn't like have that impression reading it. I should just say that, but because I mean, at the end of even at the beginning, I guess, when you see like glimpses of Arcadia, which is where Lexa and Juno are trying to get to the whole time in the book. Arcadia is kind of like this safe place, and there are men who live there too. It's not like just women. Like I know you mentioned, like there's like men working alongside women when they finally get there, and then of course Rodan, I think that's how you say it.
Yeah,
is another character. Rodan. Yeah. So, and he's like a young boy, the same age as Juno. So it's not like every single man in the book is evil per se. And I didn't feel like you were trying to say that like all men are wicked or something like that. I mean, you're a man yourself, so I'd assume that you probably don't necessarily feel like that. But I do want to talk about one of the male characters also, though, Kareem. I thought he was a really, really interesting character. I liked him a lot.
Great. Yeah,
he was super likable, and he just seemed like a really great guy. But But yeah, I'm curious, like, if there was anything like you were trying to say with Kareem, or any, I guess, things that you wanted to be sure you communicated with him, because he kind of seemed like a foil compared to the other male characters in the book. So yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I always had the title right away in my head, like the man,
Mm-hmm.
comma, kind, and I wanted to encompass two things.
Mm-hmm.
Like mankind, this story is kind of, at least in the character's eyes, mankind's last hurrah. I guess it's our last
Yeah.
chance. And then the comma in the title also wants to point towards kindness. Like men
Sure.
can be kind,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this world. So that's what I needed Kareem for. So
Okay.
I created this character, which still feels weird to say that I created him, but those who read the story, like Juno, she's young and impressionable and
Mm-hmm.
ignorant, and she absorbs everything like a sponge. And Lexa is this lady who is very resentful towards a lot of things, especially
Yeah.
men, and taking care of this girl
Right.
and Arcadia itself, which you'll find out. But so Kareem kind of shows up at the right moment in both of their lives.
Yeah.
So he shows to Juno that these men can be kind, caring, saying like, "Hey, it's not so bad. We can take care of each other. We can travel together." And then there's Lexa, who just doesn't trust him,
Yeah.
because she's seen it all before, so she has no reason to trust him. But
Right. Yeah.
yeah, so he kind of shapes how both characters think about men moving forward. So he's a
Yeah.
great introduction, I think. And yeah, I always wanted him in there. I always had the idea of having a kind man show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are so many great qualities about Kareem. I mean, well, first of all, he's like not trying to just murder them from the get-go or eat them like
Yeah.
a lot of the, like, pretty much all the other men up until that point had been trying to do. But also, like, you see, like, he's really like a complex character. He can be like really tender, but he's also like strong, and he can like protect them and stuff. But he also has like this really soft side to him, and I think that's what I liked so much about Kareem. Because like in this really like kind of dog eat dog world, like you said, where you really have to be tough, or like you get killed. He's kind of showing that like it's still okay to I guess like dance and like cook. Like he knows how to cook really well,
Yeah.
and like all this sort of stuff. He like teaches Juno how to dance at this one scene that I thought was really cool, and I think he introduces her to John Denver,
Yeah.
which I remember. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that he was like this really tall, strong, like really muscular, handsome character,
Mm-hmm.
because that says right away, like, I can't trust him. He's probably that strong for a reason,
Yeah.
to use it for evil. But then you see how gentle he is and how he has a pretty like dark past.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's been just kind of like a nomad, and he's visited parts of America that
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, without giving too much away, he visits parts that
Sure.
are still remaining.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, and I thought it was actually really just like so pure how he wanted to like he was going through the Rocky Mountains because he'd always wanted to see the Rocky Mountains, but I'm gonna forget the name of the place now because I hadn't actually heard of it until I read the book. But it was a place in Utah he was trying to go to, right? That he like really wanted to
Zion
see. Yeah,
National Park.
Zion
Yeah.
National Park. Yeah, I just thought that was like so beautiful that everybody else is just trying to like hack out a living and not die basically, and he's just like, I'm just here for the ride. Like I just want to see as much beautiful stuff as I can before I die, and
Yeah.
he was really easygoing, so I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to like spend the whole time talking about Kareem, but I just thought he was such a powerful character. But one other thing that really struck me about him that I thought was so cool is that he's a black man. And I feel like so often, like in movies and in books and just any kind of media, black men are always portrayed as I mean, like a lot of times they're portrayed as villains, which is extremely like problematic and has tons of negative consequences. But also like they're not often portrayed as like being capable of like tenderness. They're not really shown as very complex characters. They're usually very one-dimensional characters. Was that part of your thought process in creating Cream? Or
Oh,
did it just kind of naturally happen?
100%. I was, yeah, I mean, even as me, a white male writing it, as soon as I started at the keyboard, I told myself, I'll be damned if there's a white savior in this book.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
I just, to me, even for the sake of the story, it's just not interesting anymore, you know?
No.
But like this guy, he's a great guy. I mean, who cares what color his skin is? But I also wanted to point out with Juno, she had never seen someone with another colored skin from herself either. So,
okay. Yeah. That's right.
It was like, how do I kind of, for lack of a better term, cram diversity in a book where there's only like 4 people, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the goal with that. But
gotcha. Cool. Yeah, so let me see here. Oh yeah, another thing, like just going off of obviously it's in the title of the book, and we talked a little bit about the, I guess, kind of gender or sex dynamic that's at play here. But like as I was reading it, it occurred to me like how much of our just like gendered objects are so embedded into our language. I mean, like one example obviously is mankind. I mean, a lot of people, you know, now we often say like humankind or the human race or something like that, so that it's not, you know, just biased towards men. But we also have words like Mother Nature, and it's just kind of interesting to me how we ascribe gender to so many things that are, you know, just really inanimate objects or
totally,
they don't have gender really. It's kind of like we're projecting that onto it. So yeah, I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, mankind versus Mother Nature was definitely weaved in and out of the story from the very beginning, whether I imply it directly or just imply it kind of like metaphorically.
Yeah.
That one's tough. Like Mother Earth, I mean, it's so ingrained, like Mother Earth and mankind are so ingrained in our brains. Like you got to come up with something real catchy to turn away from those phrases. But I think they can be appropriate in certain circumstances. I think humankind is probably a better way to say it because it's everyone, not just man.
Yeah.
And Mother Earth, I mean, that one still seems appropriate because, you know, the female species still tend to do most of the life giving. So,
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I think unlearning old terms and coming up with new terms and better ways to describe stuff is that's going to be a long-term uphill battle.
Sure. Yeah.
Hopefully it's a topic for English professors to overanalyze for a long time.
Yeah, and it feels like we're like as a society, we're starting to talk more about that and really kind of think a little bit more critically about words that we throw around all the time and don't think twice about.
Totally.
So yeah, I'm glad that that's happening. But I mean, yeah, you also see it with like Lexa, because Lexa's this really like hardened, I don't know if you'd say like bitter character, but she's really tough. Like she's really scrappy. She's like had to like fight to survive her whole life. And she, I mean, I don't want to give like too much of the book away, but another character in the book, Pan, is I guess kind of like her mother, but she was not like a mother figure to Alexa.
Yeah.
And that's like a really major conflict in her character development, is that she kind of, I got the impression that she felt kind of cheated that she never had a mother.
Yeah.
Or a father for that matter. So
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's tough too without like giving away any spoilers, but
Sure.
Yeah, so Pan is, because you technically meet her right away in the book, so it's okay.
Yeah.
She
like
is
one of the first people.
She's kind of the boss, like the boss of Arcadia, I'll say, and she is a very gray character. So her only motive is to preserve mankind or humankind. See, I did it again.
Yeah.
Humankind.
It's just so reflexive.
Yeah, and I think she's so dead set on that goal that she kind of has blinders on either side.
Sure.
So she has no time to like love anyone because her research and her work is the only thing. So she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
show a lot of compassion, and
Yeah.
Lexa definitely resents that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's fleshed out a lot in the book too. So there's like yeah, Lexa's, she's got it from every angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's had a rough time.
Yeah, you really feel bad for Alexa while you're reading the book. I mean, because there's also several times when she just like instinctively calls Pan mom, like
Yeah,
in some of the flashbacks.
and she's told not to.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not your mother. Don't call me that.
Yeah.
Which is just like, ugh.
Yeah, so it's tough to like hate Pan, but like you get pretty mad at her. But she,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she's got one goal, and I mean, you also got to give props to her for what she's created or been able to sustain too. So
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure there weren't any quite black and white characters. So
sure.
I wanted a lot of like gray areas for people to like think on, and
Mm-hmm.
it would have been unrealistic for Pan to be like this, like all mother, like she's
Yeah,
loving and compassionate, but also a genius and all these things. I just don't think it would have hit the heart as much.
yeah. And I like that you did that because I mean, with a character like Pan who is like, um, like raising so many kids essentially, but not really their mothers. You would expect a character like that to be kind of like a prototypical like motherly figure, but she's not really. She is like you said, kind of like more scientific. I don't know if I'd say cold, but like you kind of get that impression sometimes. So
Yeah, she's
yeah,
definitely
she's a
absorbed.
complex character. Yeah.
And for her
Um.
too, you can even look into it. She's had failure after failure
Mm-hmm.
in her goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone's just having a rough time.
Yeah. Hard all around.
But yeah, and then
Speaking. Oh,
Lexa,
sorry. Go
just one
ahead.
last thing, like
No, you're fine.
you get a sense of this right away in the book too, where Lexa
Yeah,
kind of resents Juno because she resents her mom. It kind of like
that's right. Yeah.
that resentment passes down,
Uh huh.
which
Yeah.
happens in real life too.
Yeah. Totally. No, it's very realistic in that respect. Because I mean, like one thing that is consistent throughout the book is that like Lexa's constantly trying to I guess kind of keep herself from showing any emotion. It's like she's trying to remind herself like not to get attached to Juno. It's almost like this is
Right.
just business. Like I don't need to get my emotions mixed into it.
Yeah, emotions hurt, so she doesn't want to feel it, and she's
Yeah.
lost everything before.
Yeah. But then there are like some really kind of tender moments between Lex and Juno where she does kind of let her guard down. Like I hope I'm not like spoiling too much, but there's like a scene where they go swimming
Yep.
and Lexa teaches Juno how to swim, and she like I think Juno's like she actually let me have fun for once or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That was those are funny. My wife's favorite parts are like the little tender moments they have.
yeah,
But I also thought while writing it, like you can't have these little flashes of tenderness without like the hardened violence coming on the other side too, of like this world
right.
that doesn't care about you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's another thing with the book. There's also journal entries in it from
Yes,
Juno
yeah,
herself. So you'll read like the story of what happens, and then sometimes you'll read a little excerpt from what Juno writes, and she usually
mm-hmm.
Juno, the young girl, projects her feelings of what she's like. Oh, I caught Lexa smiling today, or something like that, and
Yeah,
you see her get excited about it,
mm-hmm.
and then even though Lexa's like, we got to get to the end, and that's it.
Yeah, like shut up, keep walking.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, what made you decide to do the journal entries with Juno? Because, I mean, we've talked about like almost every character except for Juno.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were really good for character development with her. And it was just like a lot of interiority that they lent to the story. So, yeah, what
Yeah.
was your thinking there?
When I started writing it, honestly, this went through like a lot of drafts. When I started
Yeah.
writing Mankind, it was going to be all journals. And I was
Okay.
like, I learned quickly that there was no way to like capture everything that's going on through the eyes of a 13-year-old girl
Sure.
in journal entries, and keep it like interesting and exciting. So I scrapped that. But then at the same time, I always had that final journal entry written like that. I knew how it was going to end like that.
Okay.
So then I had to go back and kind of rework some things. So I looked at, well, let's do it third person. And we'll go to like all these different storylines that combine at the end. But in there, when we're with Juno, she'll recap a day or maybe like a new experience that the reader hadn't read yet, about what she learned. And that'll kind of give you some eyes on what Juno's thinking. And I thought that would also help with like, because Lexa, the person guiding her or guiding Juno, barks at her a lot. So you don't really get a feel for like how is this affecting Juno internally often enough. So it was easier to show her like kind of sneaking away to write her little journal entries, and then we the reader can experience that. But.
Was that hard for you to, I guess, try to write from the perspective of a 13-year-old girl? I feel like that would be hard for me.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. Maybe I have a young heart. I've had multiple people tell me like, you really captured kind of like that shame and eagerness and awkwardness of a kid.
Yeah. I thought you did too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people, I had a conversation with someone about this, like the adolescent experience, I think isn't quite so different from like men and women. I think everyone's feeling that weird awkwardness and shame all the time. I know we have different body parts changing, but I feel like men maybe try to hide what they're feeling too much. But yeah, I think back to me in middle school, I was probably the weirdest, like goofiest.
Try not to remember me in middle school.
I mean, we've all felt it, so it was just a matter of maybe like tapping back into that. Like there's a scene early in the book where Alexa has to check if Juno's breasts are showing, and Juno gets very embarrassed by it, and it wasn't hard to imagine like how embarrassing that would be. Even like,
totally.
Even if you weren't taught the social norms, it would still be like super, like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, because I mean, throughout the book, like Alexa's trying to like mask Juno's sex. She doesn't want other people to find out that she's a young girl. So I think that was like a creative way of showing like that kind of shame. And like, God, I can just imagine like how much more magnified that would kind of make it feel if like you, especially like having to hide, like you already kind of have, I guess, like a natural tendency to hide it. But then, you know, it's like, if you show this, we're going to die kind of thing, it probably just like kind of piles on the shame, I would imagine.
Totally.
There was,
it's like,
sorry, go ahead.
It's Lexa and Juno, like they're already in trouble, but if everyone knew that a young girl was running around, I mean, it would just be even worse. So so Juno's like, why do I have to hide this? Like, I don't get it a lot of times. She's like, I don't get it, but I'm embarrassed for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was like that one scene when it was after, like, we can cut this out if I'm spoiling too much of the book, but
I'll let you know.
It was like this one scene after they'd met Kareem and he was like camping with them and stuff. And I think it was around this time that Juno got her first period, and like, Kareem saw, and she realized that she'd kind of like outed her and Alexa, and she was just like devastated and like so embarrassed. Obviously, like for one thing, you know, like that's already an embarrassing thing, but then like on top of that, it was just, you know, she'd kind of disappointed Alexa, I guess, or thought that she had. So,
and that she thought she disappointed her. That's okay. We could talk about that. It's that was also a moment I had like written on day one.
Okay, cool.
That was the quote unquote test for Kareem. Like, how's he gonna react to this once he learns what's really going on? But yeah, that was that like inner shame. I didn't have to dig too deep to find that, because like I felt it like kids in locker rooms, you know how it
Sure.
feels. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then, yeah, that was kind of a pivotal moment. And Juno didn't know what was going on, but it was happening. She couldn't stop it. She just cried.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then, so that was a time for the adults in the room to see how they were going to act,
Yeah. I thought that was a great way to make that happen. Going back to Pan just a little bit, we were talking about like what Pan is building, but I mean, from the beginning of the story, you can tell that Arcadia is kind of like I was saying, it's kind of like a safe haven, and it seems like some like kind of respite from the rest of the world that's so harsh and like deadly. But like at the beginning, the very very beginning, like the opening scene of the book when Juno's mom is like coming up to the gates or the wall outside of Arcadia. It and even Lexa from the beginning mentions it's like an impenetrable fortress kind of.
Yeah.
What were you hoping to show with Arcadia? Because I mean, like later in the book, it seems kind of like this utopian kind of community. Like the word ecofeminist came to mind when I was reading it.
Yeah.
Was that intentional, or like what were you trying to say with Arcadia?
I had a few notes on this that I kind of want to expand on too. Like, so Arcadia, we see right at the beginning, this woman's running up to the doors, and it's clear that you can't just knock on the door and someone will let you in, and it's this domed structure that's just like kind of like ominous almost. And so I had to put it, I mean, even though it's a desert area, I found ways to put it in Provo, Utah, just because it had to be a realistic goal that these people could walk to from Denver to Utah. So yeah, what I was trying to show with that is that I'll go back. So I wanted to make sure all the technology in this book existed in some form or another today.
Yeah.
So like all the solar stuff.
Right. Like the smart house.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that too. But yeah, Arcadia is kind of like, what is the culmination of all this tech that we could do to make a self-sustaining, like indoor campus almost?
Sure.
And then when the reader sees it at the end, they'll see like I point out a lot of like, it's important to know that you can't have A without B, you can't have B without C, you can't have C without D. So like if you want flowers, you got to have healthy soil. If you want healthy soil, you got to have insects. And then, the food chain all the way to the bottom and the top. You got to have like these things. So I make a mention of like introducing species or plants one at a time to see like what will coexist with each other. And that's important. But the other thing with kind of like a subversion of Arcadia, the characters run into this smart home in the middle of the mountains where they get to have a few days of quote unquote the old life.
Yeah.
And that was another way to show, so this house, it runs on like solar panels, like the roof with solar panels. It was built kind of into the mountain to manage temperature.
Yeah.
Inside, it sourced its own water from below, and it had like vacuum sealed stuff. It like had everything you could imagine today. Like with a self-sustaining home, and the characters are just loving it. And the thing with that was to point out, and I think Kareem even says it I know Kareem even says it. It talks about that this stuff exists. Like we can live like this, but there's it's a question of the haves and the have-nots. Like who can afford to live like this? This self-sustaining way, and so that was an important part for the characters to see. Like, hey, we could just stay here our whole lives, but then the danger catches up with them. But yeah, then back to Arcadia, that was like the Uber version of that little house, and
kind of like the realization of that idea.
Yep. And then there were and there are some, you were right earlier, there are some men still hanging around there working, but everyone's infertile, so they're all just an aging population. But you see like how everyone's just working together in this beautiful kind of utopia and how it's possible and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt very like egalitarian. Like, I mean, the book doesn't spend like a ton of time in Arcadia, but like the glimpses that you do get to see of it, it seems very like you were saying, like people are more like equals. They're working side by side. There doesn't seem to be as much like, I guess like class presence at all, really, or like
Right.
like inequality between genders and sexes. So yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah, and through the story, like there are sections that go back to Arcadia, but the reader is always
Mm-hmm.
stuck in the
Yeah.
lab, like the
Right.
science facilities. So they don't. My goal was for the reader to think like, why the heck is this place so important? And then
Mm-hmm.
they get to experience at the same time as Juno. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
the grand reveal, I guess you'd say.
Sure. I don't know if you've like read any solar punk stories or like had much exposure to solar punk literature, but it made me think a lot of that. Have you come across that before?
No, is that a genre or
Yeah, so it's
title?
I actually just got like a short story collection that's all like solar punk stories, but I'm like trying to learn more about it cuz it seems really cool, but
Is
it
this like
is
steampunk but with solar panels or?
yeah, yeah, basically. So, yeah, and let me just say, like, I'm not really like a huge fan of steampunk kind of genre fiction or movies or anything like that.
Sure.
I just always kind of thought it was a little hokey or corny, but
I think that's by design though.
yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not trying to like, yuck on anyone's yum if they really like steampunk, but
Oh, totally.
yeah, solar punk is this idea that I mean, like anytime there's a story about like climate change, a lot of like cli-fi is dystopian. But solar punk is like trying to kind of turn that on its head. So it's like, what if instead of like a dystopian future, we imagined what like a better future could look like if we did get things right now and if we did decide to,
Yeah.
like basically like make an Arcadia. But yeah, Arcadia was like just has all the classic like solar punk themes. I thought
Nice.
it's like a feminist society, or at least that's what it seemed like from the brief scenes that we saw of Arcadia outside of the lab. It's sustainable. It's like humans and nature living in harmony. Essentially, is like I guess the overall kind of theme of that. So
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted
yeah.
to do it in a way that felt grounded or realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So they still like have complaints like we don't have this yet and we don't have that
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
still not raining. But
Mm-hmm.
there was still like hurdles to jump.
Yeah, but it's like they were working on it, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like one thing that because I mean I do like on the podcast talk a lot about dystopian fiction just by nature of the territory.
Right, right.
But I'm also like very interested in utopias, but I think like a common thing that you hear writers and readers both saying about utopias is that they're boring. It's like, okay, well, if everything's perfect, like you don't have a story because stories like require conflict,
That's
but
That's exactly it. I've
yeah.
just for fun, like on the side, I'll write down these notes of like, hey, what would this cool utopian world or society
Mm-hmm.
look like? And then like I'll write like 1,000 words and these bullet points and all this. Like if this happens, this happens. But then I
Yeah.
realize like there just isn't a story. There's like no
Yeah.
conflict. Everything's working.
It's kind of
Um,
harder to come up with one. Yeah.
yeah. So someday someone might do it, but it's tough because obviously that's the ultimate goal. I would think for
Yeah.
society is to remove all the conflict, but
Sure.
people still like to read exciting drama and things like that too. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to
Yeah, for
have
sure.
a couple of bad things happen.
Yeah. But I mean, even with Arcadia, like I mean, compared to like the outside world, it seems perfect, but there's still like conflict going on in there.
Yeah, it's still a
Like,
work in progress
yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I
yeah,
wanted to keep a lot of the humanity.
sure.
It's like everyone. Yeah, every character has their own issues. So
Right.
that's important.
Yeah, it's just like a human condition kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there are like some, not to like spend the whole rest of the time talking about utopias, but there are like some writers who I've come across who like I mean, I wouldn't say that they're like smash hits like books or anything like that, but they've like done like a pretty decent job of writing utopias. I mean, like the two that just come to mind off the top of my head are like Kim Stanley Robinson and Ursula K. Le Guin. They're
Totally.
both two science fiction writers,
The
but
is it Ministry of the Future, that one that just came out?
yeah, I think that's his newest one.
That's
I
on my
haven't read
short
that one
list to
yet.
read. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've been meaning to check that out too. I've only read one of his books. I've read probably more about him as a writer than I actually read his writing. Um, but
He
yeah,
gets,
he has this. Oh, sorry. What were
yeah,
you
I was
gonna
just
say?
say he gets like into the nitty gritty too of the
Yeah, he's like,
policy.
yeah. That's what I was about to say. Yeah, he like gets really, really detailed. He's a great writer, but he has this book. I can't remember when it came out. I want to say like late '80s, like early '90s. This like science fiction book. He wrote, it was actually like a triptych is the way that he described it, but it was a series of 3 books, but they were all set in like different scenarios, like future scenarios. So
Okay.
like one of them was, they're all set in Orange County, California. So one of them is like what would happen if California basically turned into like this like technocracy kind of thing, like super libertarian, like basically what California is now. Like giant tech companies basically own everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, he kind of like predicted a lot of what's happening now with sort of like tech companies really kind of playing like a big kind of societal role, like almost in tandem with the government, sort of.
Yeah.
And then another one was like, what would happen if we had like a disastrous climate scenario and like California is just totally devastated by wildfires and, you know, drought and that sort of thing.
Which it
But
is.
yeah, which it is, which is also true, but or at least getting closer to that reality. His version was like pretty freaking bleak, but yeah, and then the last one is this book called Pacific Edge, which is like, well, what if like none of that happened, and what if California was actually more of this like, I guess kind of like eco-socialist sort of utopia sort of situation where you know, like there still exists like, I mean, capitalism is still around, but it's like restrained and it's like kind of kept under control so that we're not like exceeding like environmental limits and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I don't know. I thought that book was pretty cool, but that's like kind of a thing that he struggles with in that book is it's also a book where there's journal entries alongside just like narrative prose,
Yeah.
but it's like one of the guys who if he was a lawyer, actually he was like responsible for kind of forming the structure of government that California had in that scenario. His big thing was like a utopia is not a destination, it's like a striving. So it's like no matter what, like you're never going to reach a utopia. It's kind of like an asymptotic kind of thing. Like
Right.
you're never going to quite get there. So I don't know. I'm just kind of like ranting here, but
Yeah. No.
that was if you're interested, it's a really cool book, but a lot of it is about like local politics, and it's really kind of a drama in a lot of ways.
Yeah. That makes
so-
sense. I think a lot of it, even today in politics, is a lot of drama.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we can come back to kind of, we've been talking about like all these abstract things in the future. Coming back to present day for just a bit, wanted to talk a little bit more about the plastic crisis. So we kind of like touched on this at the beginning of the book, but plastic plays a pretty huge role in this book. Is that something that you were hoping to raise more awareness about, was just like making people think twice about how much plastic they consume and like trying to push for better ways of doing stuff?
Oh yeah, 100%. One of the, yeah, it's tough. Okay, it's for the majority of the first half of the book, this is on purpose. I make plastic kind of a passive character, where the characters always like interact or notice, like if they see trash or whatever, there's just little pieces of plastic everywhere. And I wanted to get it to the point where to the extent where like the reader's like, why the heck is this guy mentioning plastic so much in this book?
Yeah.
And then there's the reveal. But yeah, plastic waste is a tough, like, topic to wrap your mind around. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of it. So like I'm sure just up top of most people's minds, they've probably heard of the plastic island in the Pacific Ocean,
Yeah.
or they probably have heard that Southeast Asia like buys a lot of our plastic recyclable material, and then they
Yeah.
just dump it in villages where it just sits
Mm-hmm.
and towers into like walls of
Or they just
chip
burn it.
bags. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to raise awareness through the book, but I didn't want to like pander. I just
Sure.
wanted people, I want to say like, hey, this is how bad it is, and this is what it does to the body. And then you can do your further research afterwards. I had some resources at the end, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as I know, like today there are two ways to get rid of plastic. You have
Yeah.
you can burn it, or you can
Mhm.
wait 1,000 years for it to decompose.
Yeah.
The problem is plastic doesn't actually decompose. It just
breaks
turns into
down.
smaller pieces,
Right.
and then it gets in the water, it gets in the ground, it gets in our food, it gets in our food's food, and then it gets into our bodies, which it already
Yeah.
is. And then
Yeah.
to even hammer another nail in the coffin, the plastic that is already in our bodies, the microplastics, when we have children, and the mother passes some of that down to the baby
God.
and so forth, and
That's
pretty
a mess.
rough.
Yeah.
I know we talked about BPA. That's just
Sure,
one
sure.
of the dangerous chemicals, but
Mhm.
yeah. And as I said before, like the best way to like understand it is those microplastics get in your body, and then they block vital communications between different like cells and responses and things inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can get as scary as you want, but
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I noticed maybe nowadays is I don't know, I know it's a harsh term, like mindlessness, where the average person, it's not that they're like actively being bad. They're not like doing bad behaviors. They're just not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the one I always go back to is when I go to the grocery store and I'm in like the produce aisle,
Yeah.
and I'll see like one like person grab, the little like produce plastic bags.
Yeah, like
they'll
for
grab
broccoli and stuff.
Yeah, they'll grab like 2 apples and put it
Oh,
in.
my mom does that.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll go to the checkout and they'll put that little plastic bag in another plastic bag.
I know.
Before leaving the store.
Not get it. Yeah.
And I know a popular meme right now is like what feels illegal but isn't. And I think like leaving a store without a bag sort of feels illegal, or in like our brains,
Yeah, totally.
So one thing I really done, my goal for 2020, even before the pandemic hit, was to eliminate in my life single-use plastic bags.
Yeah.
And it's harder than it sounds, but
it is hard. Yeah.
Everyone's got that closet where they have a plastic bag full of plastic bags.
Yep.
So I bought reusable bags, and we got them in each car. And then when we go shopping, if I can't carry it, it goes in the reusable bag. I try, and it's tough sometimes, but like you'll be in a store. Let's say I go and I buy a pair of headphones, and like immediately, the cashier grabs it and throws it in the bag just because that's what you do. That's part of like the mindlessness. And so I always try to be like, no bag. And sometimes I'll get a look. They'll be like, what? I'm like, no, I don't need a bag. I'll just carry the already plastic wrapped item out,
Right, exactly. I was watching this video earlier today. There's this YouTube channel called Our Changing Climate that's really good. It's this guy, and he just does like a lot of, like his Patagonia really sustainable, like his Apple sustainable, like stuff like that. But yeah, one thing that he did a video on that I watched was I guess like the environmental impact of Amazon Prime. Essentially, it was just like e-commerce, like all the packaging and stuff that we buy, and the carbon emissions that come from transporting that, and et cetera. But yeah, he was like, my family just shipped me a bicycle helmet, and I thought it was ironic because when I got the box that had the bicycle helmet in it, it was like a Russian doll, and it was like a box within a box.
Oh.
But it was all to protect this thing that is designed to protect your head. So
No.
he's like, if you have something that's designed to be like hardy and like resist damage, like why do you have to go to such great lengths to like wrap it in so much stuff? It's just like packaging on packaging.
It's wild too, because it's like a wildly complicated structural issue.
Yeah,
it's like
it is.
You have to do, I mean, at least with food and drink, you have to do with like safety and non-contaminants.
And some of it's like laws, like you legally are not allowed to, like omit certain packaging for,
right.
Like I think clothing is another thing that sometimes you have to wrap it in plastic.
My wife, she said when, and this was even before we were talking about like climate and plastic waste. She said she remembered, like, I think one year in college, she spent a summer in Chicago working in Old Navy. And she's like, the worst, and she was just complaining about the work. She's like, the worst job was when the new box of jeans came in. I had to unwrap every single pair of jeans out of plastic. And then that's another, that can even go towards the mindlessness, because like we were thinking like, what a boring, monotonous job to do, but also what a waste of plastic. It's single use, not even hardly single use plastic.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah, I used to work, it's actually the same company. I used to work when I was at college at Banana Republic.
Yeah.
And the shopping mall, which is like the worst job I've ever had. If anyone who works at Banana Republic is watching this, don't sue me. But yeah, it was like that too. Because I mean, like, I think a lot of the times you feel like you're doing, like, if you are trying to be mindful of like your plastic consumption, I guess, you do feel like you're, I guess, being better, quote unquote, by going to the store and actually buying something, because you're like, oh, there's not as much packaging waste. Which, I mean, like, if you're looking at it from a carbon emissions point of view, it is better to go to the store. At least, like, sometimes it is, like you said, super complicated, and there's a lot of logistical details that go into that.
Totally.
Sometimes it's actually better to just order it online and not pay for expedited shipping, but it just depends on so many different factors. But yeah, I mean, like, when we would get in new shipments of clothes, which was all the time, because it's like Gap is the big company that owns all of it, but it's all like fast fashion, and it's all like, mass produced, really kind of cheaply made stuff.
Definitely.
And it all comes in these big, like, flat packed boxes, and like you said, everything in there is just wrapped in like plastic film, and you just have to get a box cutter, rip open the boxes, like tear all the plastic off of it, and then we would have just like 3 or 4 big trash bags at the end of the night, like in the stock room.
Yeah.
It's just full of just plastic bags. And
it's just one location.
Yeah, I know. It's just one location. It's just insane. And we weren't even really a big location. So yeah, it was a mess. And I mean, I guess it depends on where you live, because like different states have different regulations, or like, businesses try to appeal more to like eco-conscious consumers or whatever. Like in California, I would imagine,
right.
Like some stores will probably make a bigger effort to recycle or try to recycle. At least where we were, they did not, to my knowledge, I don't think they did that at all. I mean, it could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it just went straight to landfill.
Well, and time and time again, and this will probably be as long as we're digging up crude oil, it will always be cheaper to make new plastic than to recycle old plastic, which is tough.
Exactly.
But then you can throw another like wrench in the machine, and you can think about like, well, what if we just switch to more like cardboard and paper packaging that decomposes, but then you're cutting down more trees and plant life. And then I know they've made like some great strides with like bamboo, because that grows like 30 plus inches a day if it gets proper water.
Nuts.
But who knows? I don't know the right answers. I just know like what I can control. So
sure.
I know that I don't need the plastic bags, so I'll try to like, and I can talk about this later too. Like I'll just try to like reduce that demand that I need for it, and hopefully others follow suit.
Yeah. There is so there's this guy named Tom Zaki, and he started this company called TerraCycle. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they're in New Jersey. But he's got this other company that I think is like a joint venture between TerraCycle and Procter and Gamble, I think. But it's called Loop, and the idea is just like 90% of plastic that goes in the recycling bin doesn't actually get recycled. It was like, as you said, it gets shipped to like, Indonesia or China where it just sits, and a lot of times is actually used as fuel to like cook and like horrible things like that. Like they just burn it. Like you can't really recycle a lot of plastic. It's extremely complicated.
Right.
And
it's another reason, that why it doesn't decompose. It's such like a chemical like monstrosity almost.
Yeah. And there's so many different kinds of plastic. But yeah, he wrote this book. I forget now what it's called, but yeah, it's basically like all about like why recycling is an imperfect solution to tackling like the plastic crisis, because
it was marketed so well.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's totally intentional. It's like the fossil fuel industry is like, like it's fine that we use this much because you can recycle it, and they would like fudge the numbers on like how recyclable it actually is and all this sort of stuff. But even if it has, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, like, a lot of times, even if it has, at least in the US, like if it even has like a recycle label on the plastic container, like a lot of the times the manufacturer of the plastic doesn't even know like what is like recyclable or not. And
they each have like
dyes
a number.
Can screw it up. Yeah,
there's the little like triangle symbol and there's a number inside, and each number means it's like level of recyclability or something like that. And I mean, if you're just going to like grab something at the store, I mean, you don't have time.
How would you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody knows. I mean, like I've researched this stuff and I don't even remember all of it, but it's a mess. And I mean, like the other thing, like you were saying, like plastic doesn't decompose; it just breaks down into smaller pieces. Like you can only recycle like. Of the 10% of plastic that does actually get recycled, you can only recycle it, like 1 or 2 times before it becomes so brittle that it's useless and you can't even do anything with it anymore. So it's just like the best solution, like you were saying, is just to not use any of it as much as you can.
Right. I mean, that was another, I think right when I finished this book, because you mentioned Patagonia earlier, which that's a company I really admire. They're doing a lot of cool stuff. But I watched, they like released a video this last, I want to say winter or something, where they were recycling, they were like shredding up plastic bottles or whatever and like turning them into fibers. And I was thinking like, wow, what a great idea, like reusing all these. And then like, but I had just like written and done all this research on like, I cannot imagine how much microplastic is floating around in that factory.
I know.
I hope they're all wearing like masks and goggles and stuff.
Like double masks. I actually have a shirt like that. This shirt is a Patagonia shirt, but this is I think it's like half hemp, half organic cotton. But I actually didn't know that when I bought it. I just bought it because I liked the shirt. But I've got another one that's like a sweatshirt kind of, and it is made like mostly with recycled plastic bottles. And when I got it, I was like, oh, sweet. Like, this is such a cool idea. But then after I was learning more about plastics, I was like, oh, like if you buy, I guess I didn't realize until the past couple of years that a lot of the clothes you buy or you wear is actually just plastic. Like you're actually just wearing plastic. Like anything that's polyester.
Like, any like fitness clothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that's like, Lululemon or like yoga pants or anything like that. Basketball shorts. It's like swishy running shirts. Which all plastic.
I mean, it's admirable I'm glad that they're doing something. They're like trying something. It's great. I think like, well, we can shred up. There's already so many bottles. We can shred them up and turn them into clothes if people need clothes anyways. I think that's great. It's not. It's tough to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. And it's also like, I mean, it's hard because it seems like the right thing to do. And I mean, it is good that they're trying to, at least they're like, saying that plastic is a problem. They're trying to do something about it, but it's also just like, it's so hard to come up with a good solution for it.
Oh,
it's
totally.
It's like, there's just not a silver bullet for it. But yeah, I mean, I realize we're kind of getting away from talking about the book here a little bit, but this was like a pretty big part of the book. But the one thing that I wanted to mention with all that being said, like talking about like individual like consumer choices and stuff, is that I mean, at the end of the day, like it is great if you like you should try to reduce plastic waste. And I don't like I never got the impression from reading your book that you were like you were saying you didn't want to like come across as like shaming consumers or anything like that.
Yeah, it was a
Because
big goal to like
yeah,
not pander for sure.
yeah, because I mean, like in a lot of situations, like you don't really have a choice. Like it's just kind of like what there is, and
Yeah, I'm totally
yeah,
guilty of it too. Like
yeah,
I'm
and
also a consumer. I need to buy things.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like there's only so far you can go. Like, and so much of it is like depending on where you live, and like a lot of it is like probably if you're more privileged, like if you're wealthy and like you live in a more privileged area, you probably have better opportunities to reduce plastic, like single use plastic in your life.
Oh, 100%.
So
That's another
yeah, yeah,
that's another whole book right there.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I mean, like so much of it is just a systemic problem. It's not like,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, consumers can like make different choices, and like I think that has helped like send some signals to companies that like, oh, people actually hate this stuff, and like they
Right.
would actually prefer it if we used less plastic because they don't like it. But I mean, it's weird because if you look at like the number of plastic that's produced over time, like even though there is much more of a movement, not like a zero waste, I guess, movement, like plastic production just keeps going up and it actually hasn't really gone down at all.
Yeah.
Even though like the perception might be that it has. So yeah, it's like totally a systemic problem. And I thought it was really interesting that the main villain in your book was like a plastic tycoon at some point. So I don't know. That just seemed like a great metaphor to me.
Yeah, I would love to talk about him, but I want people to just read and find
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to like how we deal with these sort of issues that come up in the book, like there's so many great characters in the book, and like they all kind of have their own strengths and weaknesses. But I was wondering like if you could kind of like pick and choose from all the different, I guess, like good guys or good characters in your book. Like what do you think are some of like the most, I guess, like admirable or best traits that we can try to like emulate now to, I guess, create a better future?
Um, well, this is set pretty far in the future.
Right.
There's a few stragglers, few remnants left. I think well, Alexa she was raised in this community who entirely understood the mistakes of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so she knew even like not to touch plastic, just use her reusable metal canteens, which you hear about a lot in the book. Um, but still, even her, like the amount of food that's left, they had to resort to like MREs, the meal ready to eat, kind of like the
Yeah.
military uses. So even those are plastic wrap. I mean, you can't escape it even in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But she understood like how to survive, how to protect without like leaving a trace and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kareem, he also was a little bit of a character to kind of show how the ignorance of the past like just still trickles down into the future. Like he
Mm-hmm.
was completely unaware, he was just surviving day to day. Juno, the young girl, she's basically a sponge. She'll learn and absorb anything you kind of tell her. So she learns like how to get water. Well, and these are
Yeah.
like unrealistic things that we need to do today. But um,
Well, I think, I mean, if I can jump in, I still think that there's some like good things you can learn from that though, because I mean, if you're like trying to be like, I guess like the best qualities of Lexa, like you could, like try to go, I guess like zero waste, if you will,
yeah,
like use a metal canteen. And I guess like while Kareem is maybe a little bit more unconscious, like I think it's also good that he knows how to kind of like cut loose from time to time,
oh
and
yeah,
kind of be in
definitely.
the moment and
Yeah, like we have
not be
this,
like so uptight all the time.
like we went on this tangent just a moment ago about like how terrible the plastic industry can be, and but
Yeah,
you also can't dwell on it. You need to do what you
sure.
can, and you need to like still live life and have friends and stuff, because
Right.
no solution, the thing I try to remember is no solution will be like this tomorrow or next month. It'll be
Yeah,
generations
exactly.
through behavioral changes.
Sure.
But one of my favorite parts in the book actually was when Juno, the young girl, and Kareem find out about plastic from Lexa at the exact same moment, and both
Yeah. Yeah.
react entirely differently.
Mm-hmm.
Kareem kind of is like, what the heck are you talking about? How is this possible?
Yeah.
And Juno's like, oh, huh. Because she like broke a piece and the little dust was on her finger. And she's like, oh yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and that might even be an allegory to learn about this stuff younger,
Yeah. And just be like open-minded too. Because I mean, like that is like one of the best things about Juno, I thought, is just like, I mean, it helps that she's a child, and I mean, you kind of lose this as you get older, but she like has kind of like such a sense of wonder for the world. And
yeah, I wanted to make her like relentlessly curious. Like she wanted to know
she
everything.
totally was. Yeah, because I mean, even like, I mean, sure, to someone like Alexa, who's just like, this sucks. Like, I know like how good the world used to be. Like, Juno doesn't have any knowledge of that, so she's kind of like pure in this sense, because she kind of in some ways sees the world more for what it is than like characters like Lexa do, because she's just like she's also pretty ignorant about a lot of the like history and stuff, because like obviously she grew up in a time when there's no school or anything like that.
Right.
So like everything that she knows is just from like books, and like she's seen like old magazines and stuff with like animals, and she's like hasn't really ever seen animals before. So
yeah,
the times when I think there's like a part where they find a lizard, and she's just like, oh my god, it's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and Lex is like, it's a lizard or something, So I don't know, but I thought that was really cool though. I was like, I mean, yeah, it is beautiful. It's like, it's life, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and Juno having never seen any other life, they encounter this lizard, and it's just like blows her mind, and gets to hold it, and it's her like heart is beating super fast, and, like that childhood, then that was an important part. Yeah, so to still like have that sense of wonder growing up is important, even when you're older. Like looking outside as things grow in the spring, just take a second to watch. Or I like having a bird feeder in my backyard because I like watching birds, and you'll notice that each different type of bird has its own little behavior, which I think normally one would just think, oh, they just fly in, hop around, and they eat and they fly away. But they actually have little quirks and stuff that are fun to watch.
Yeah, like kind of like little personalities.
Yeah,
I think that's cool.
Yeah, and then so each of the characters, they try to like show a different way of living, and they kind of show how like the past has shaped the way they live then, at least in the story. But
yeah, cool. Yeah, I really like that. All right, cool. I guess kind of in closing then, kind of coming up on time here, I was wondering if there are any like organizations or causes that you would recommend people checking out if they want to help with some of these issues.
Yeah, I had like 3 things I wanted to touch on. More ideas than like causes.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah, so I'm kind of one of those people who thinks that there's like 2 big ways to make impact broader change, and that's voting and spending money. So our dollar usually speaks the loudest to things like that. But one of the first idea with climate change, we need to understand that corporations are the ones that are polluting far more than us. Like it's not the individual, and energy production and I think refrigerant are like the top 2 or top 3.
Yeah,
like
they're pretty huge.
Just the chemical in your air conditioner.
Yeah.
So with the climate change, a couple of things: vote for people who believe in it, which sounds dumb to say, but it seems relevant.
A lot of people don't. Today. Yeah. So
you gotta ask your politicians that are running, like, what do you want to do as far as the climate or pollution, or like how are we even going to manage our own waste in this city, whatever city you live in or town. That's a very important. people who are excited about the future, more green energy.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I read in Bill Gates did a Reddit Ask Me Anything
Oh yeah, yeah.
a while ago, and I read through all of them. But he was saying there's this company that I actually looked into. It's called Native Energy, and they do carbon offsets for
Okay.
yourself or your company, and they're really popular. They try to you should encourage, what I'm saying is you should encourage your boss to go purchase carbon offsets,
Yeah.
because then a separate company is trying to offset the amount of carbon that your individual company produces.
Sure.
And they do it in a lot of interesting, cool ways. So I would suggest just going to nativeenergy.com and checking out their stuff.
Okay.
But
Cool. I haven't heard of them. I'll have to check it out.
yeah, they do a lot with green energy and solar and windmills, but they also carbon absorption, all these crazy things.
Yeah.
It's all
yeah.
laid out on their site.
Cool.
Another thing, my second thing we kind of touched on earlier, was the recycling. So they marketed it really well with the reduce, reuse, recycle, with the slogan. And if you just throw your plastic bottle in the bin and no worries. But I think as a collective, we need to reduce, reuse, and reduce some more.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know if that's my little catchphrase or not, but I think just as a whole, we need to reduce our demand. I love that some larger cities are outlawing straws and plastic bags. I think that's a good step in the right direction. Because once people find out we don't need these things really,
right.
that reduces the demand for at least one piece of the industry, and maybe they find another solution or whatever. But yeah, that's part of it, with speaking with our dollars. If you're at the store and you see two products on the shelf, and one is made out of recycled material and the other is this bright, colorful plastic thing, maybe just, you can Google it quick because you always have your phone on you, and maybe go with the other product with better packaging. And the last one, this one's kind of abstract, but I've been touting it a lot with my friends. They're probably annoyed with me, but this one's on soil health.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's kind of a epidemic with biodiversity with American lawns.
Yeah.
And soil health and things being able to grow and things like that. And it's kind of I had one friend that put it as an insect apocalypse, but
yeah, I mean, kind of.
Yeah. So the perfect, in my opinion, the perfect American lawn was this idea that was pushed with suburbia in the 50s. And I think that needs to be unlearned heavily. And I'm not saying anyone's bad, but one of the things I noticed, and you can look out the window every fall and you'll see, the leaves fall. People rake up all the leaves. They put all the leaves in a big plastic bag, and then they ship the plastic bag to the dump. And then in the spring, they buy giant plastic containers full of fertilizer. And
yeah, that's a good point.
It's such a bizarre cycle when it's
why did you buy that?
It
the trees gave it to you.
Yeah, so a lot of the nutrients the earth and your grass needs just falls from trees, or the mulch after you mow, just leave it. You know?
Yeah.
So things like that, and then and here is a company that I like. It's called Prairie Moon Nursery.
Okay.
And you can go to their site, and then they can ship you local flowers and plants that are
cool.
that grow in your region.
Yeah, native species.
Yeah, and this is all for pollinators and for just biodiversity.
Cool.
But
I love that.
Yeah, Prairie Moon Nursery. It's really cool. But so I ordered some, and we dedicated a section of our lawn out here.
Nice.
Just to we planted those, and we're just letting it go. And it's in an area where it's in the corner, so it's not disturbing any human that would be back there. But it's yeah, so that it's trying to increase that diversity, because we've even noticed fewer bees in our flowers in the last few years, which is I mean, they used to be everywhere, but
yeah. I was reading, I don't know how prevalent they were in South Dakota and further out west, but we used to have these butterflies here called I want to say like Eastern monarch butterflies, but I just always called them monarch butterflies. But they're these, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're just like these huge, beautiful, like vibrant orange butterflies. They're so pretty.
Yeah.
But they've just like, their populations have just like plummeted. And I think like I was reading it said like since 1997, I want to say. But I remember when I was a kid, that was like one of my favorite things. Like as the weather was warming up again after winter, was seeing the monarch butterflies come out.
Totally.
Because we had this huge like butterfly bush in my front yard when in one of my, I guess the house that I lived in until I was a little bit older. But yeah, I would like go catch butterflies and like go watch butterflies and stuff when I was a kid. But like you hardly ever see them anymore, and it's partly due to things like that, like you were saying.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Like it's a whole other thing I could complain about, but you can go to like any hardware store, like a Home Depot or local spot,
Sure.
and there's an entire aisle dedicated to killing insects,
Yep.
like lawn insects and like trapping squirrels and stuff like that, and all that sort of stuff. Like there's an entire aisle dedicated to like destroying your lawn so you can have green grass. And I think
Yeah.
and like the word I keep gravitating towards is like unlearning. Need to unlearn, like when we're young, growing up, to like want that picture perfect house with a green grass lawn.
Yeah.
Is not, I mean, it looks pretty in photos, but I think a lawn with a bunch of flowers and a vegetable garden and maybe, you can have your patch of grass to do that as well. But I think the diversity is prettier in my opinion. But.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's you mentioning that made me think of two different things, but one of them is a book. Do you know the writer Wendell Berry? Are you familiar with him?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you should check him out if you want to, but he's great. He's I think he used to be an English professor, but he taught at like a bunch of different universities. He's from Kentucky and he lives there now, and I think he has a tobacco farm. He writes a lot too, but he had this book that I think came out in the 70s, but he's published multiple editions of it, called Unsettling America, or The Unsettling of America, I think is what it's called. I can look it up and send it to you later if you want me to, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is about this, and like he focuses a lot on like topsoil depletion because he's a farmer and this is like a pretty huge issue. So within like a few generations, like if we keep depleting topsoil by doing things like, trying to all have like our perfectly manicured like 50s lawns and like industrial agriculture and stuff like that, just pumping fertilizer and like insecticide into the ground instead of like actually fostering like I guess microbes and stuff in the soil. It just leads to like massive erosion. And actually one crazy thing that I read in that book that I didn't know until I read it was that actually soil erosion and like topsoil depletion in the US is actually worse now than it was during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression.
I read that too,
Yeah, which is nuts because, like I think a common conception is that was like the worst it ever got and now things are better, but actually not really the case. But yeah, that, and then I think it's on Netflix. There's a documentary called The Biggest Little Farm. I don't know if you've seen that, but or maybe it's on Hulu.
It's in my wife and I, we have a little jar that we write down movies and throw it in because we can never decide, but that's one of them that's in there.
That's a good idea. Me and my wife should do that because we always have a hard time deciding on what to watch.
Yeah, you spend an hour trying to like decide what to watch when
I know
you draw in and you have to watch what you pick out. But
that's
I
a good idea.
One in there.
I love that. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, when you do get around to watching that, that's a really great movie too because it is like exactly what you're just talking about with the lawns, like, and it also kind of reminds me about the way that you wrote Arcadia too and Mankind because it's a husband and wife, and I think he was working for like Animal Planet or something like that as a videographer, but then they decided they were sick of living in Los Angeles and they wanted to like get out of the city, so they bought this old farm that was just really in really bad shape. It was super dilapidated and like the soil health was horrible, and they had all these like invasive species and stuff, and so they pretty much just started from scratch and they reintroduced like native species, and it's like all regenerative agriculture. So they don't use pesticides. It's like, oh, we were having problems with like rodents or something because we started planting grains. So instead of, like putting out rat traps or something, I think it was actually like moles and maybe chipmunks that they were having problems with. But yeah, they're like, tunneling and stuff. So instead of like setting out traps to kill them, we just bought like bird houses for owls. So now the owls eat the rats and, and et cetera, with like all kinds of different problems. Like,
that's not, I really want to watch it now, but that kind of goes back to when I was saying you can't have A without B without C.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
With or without humans, like Earth is a very well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
It just runs and turns, and it has its own systems in place that I mean, maybe we don't need to go spray every ant in our yards. I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, I saw an interesting pic. Not to go on too long, I did see a picture show up on Reddit. It was this guy holding up prairie grass roots, and they were like 6-7 feet long. He was holding like this bundle of prairie grass and super long roots, and then he was showing like lawn roots of grass was only like 3 to 4 inches, and that goes back to the topsoil erosion.
Yeah,
like you need those.
Totally.
Roots are important because they hold the soil together. And, I mean, that's also another thing that's probably not really taught growing up. But
yeah, totally. I mean, and you see it. Oh gosh, I can't remember where I was reading about it, or maybe it was on a podcast I was listening to. I can't remember now, but I think they were talking about the Midwest because like the Midwest is all prairie for the most part. But I mean, now it's like corn and soybean fields like a lot of it is anyway. So like I forgot the percentage. I'm really bad with remembering numbers, so I don't want to say the wrong thing, but like a huge like majority of like the natural prairie grasslands in the Midwest has just been lost to like industrial agriculture now.
We have in South Dakota, I can't believe I-90, I think it is. It goes east to west across the state. We have one highway that goes east to west across the state. Anyways, from Sioux Falls, if I'm driving Sioux Falls, which is the east side, to Rapid City, which is on the west side, that's in the Black Hills.
Sure.
That entire time, it's mostly like just big ag, cornfields. I can't recall like prairie grasslands just like living freely on that drive. I'm sure there are some, but it's like protected areas and stuff, I think. I mean, we have tons of, don't get me wrong, we have tons of like national parks and like nature reserves. We have a lot of that stuff here in South Dakota, which is really nice. But if you're driving along the highway, you are likely going to be seeing a straight road and cornfields.
Yeah. That's so my brother lives outside of Chicago in like the western suburbs. So anytime I live like just outside of Atlanta. So anytime I go visit him, if I'm driving there, which I usually do, it's just like there are like 2 ways you can go from Atlanta. You can either drive like up I-75 and go through Nashville, like Louisville, Indianapolis, and then Chicago. Yeah. Or you can go like up through Memphis, Tennessee, and just drive basically straight up through Illinois. And yeah, if you go through southern Illinois, it's just like, it's so weird looking. Like to my eyes, I'm not used to seeing it, but it just looks like a totally like manufactured landscape almost. It's really, really bizarre.
Yeah, like terraformed almost, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is terraformed. It's really weird looking. But yeah, he was telling me, I'll have to ask him because I can't remember now. I want to say maybe it was like northern Michigan. Can't remember. But he was saying that there is like a national park there where it's just prairie. And they've done like a lot of restoration work there to try to restore it to what it used to be. But I mean, I never really thought about that because I guess I've never seen a prairie before, like a true like undisturbed prairie. But he was like, yeah, it's just like it does. You wouldn't think, but it's just like absolutely beautiful. And like there's so many different kinds of wildflowers that you've never seen before, and like grasses and like birds.
Yeah, just outside of Sioux Falls, we have a really, really big prairie reserve called Good Earth State Park, and it's just like what you're describing. It's pretty
cool.
Gorgeous.
Okay,
all year round too.
Yeah. So I live in the South, obviously. So we have I live like, so in Georgia, there's the state's like divided into like two, I guess like kind of geological sections, if you will. So like the northern half of the state is called the Piedmont. Well, there's like the Highlands, which is, like the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. And then there's like the Piedmont. And then there's a fault line that runs basically like right where Atlanta is in the middle of the state. And then it's coastal plain. So it kind of looks like Savannah if you go like, like plains if you go like to South Georgia.
Sure. But
a lot of that used to just be like grasslands and not like prairie because it's not really like rolling hills, but it was like a little bit more like that. But, with like slavery and, like the plantations that were built like over the past, like 300 or so years, like all that has been totally destroyed. So it's like over 90% of it is gone. Which is really sad because, for like a million different reasons, but
right.
Like grasslands are like a huge carbon sink and they're really, really important, like ecological, or I guess environment and ecosystem. So
definitely,
yeah, it's sad that, but the state is actually like doing work to do like some restoration on those now. So
great.
There's efforts to it. I'm sure they're doing more. I just don't know like a ton about it, but like the on-ramps, because we're Atlanta. We're super sprawled out. We love highways because we're dumb.
That's every state, though.
Yeah, so we've got like tons of median and like tons of on and off ramps to the highway. So
yeah.
But now like I don't know what the state department is that's doing it, but there's like a really big push to plant native species in those areas. So now when you're driving, you'll see like what before was probably just like Bermuda grass or something.
Yeah.
Or pine trees, which are actually not really as originally they were not as common in Georgia as they are now. They plant them because they grow fast. But it used to be like a lot more hardwoods than it is now. But
yeah.
So now as you're driving, you'll see like these like really pretty wildflowers that you've never seen before. And you're like, what the heck? Those are beautiful. Like, why have I never seen those before? And it turns out like they've been here for thousands of years, but we just ripped them up. So yeah, but I'm glad to see that that's happening now. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more because I'm interested now if they are doing like a whole lot more work than that. But it seems like a step in the right direction, I guess.
Totally.
So.
One more quick thing to add is the nature bridges. Have you seen those? Like the
yeah. I think I've only seen them in like Scandinavia.
Yeah, and
like pictures. I haven't been there,
so
but
far in the U.S. I forget where it is, but yeah, it's like just this bridge that goes over the highway with like nature or natural like habitat on it that animals can cross. And other than like being practical, they just look beautiful. So
yeah, I think that's such a cool idea.
I think there are fun solutions out there that I think everyone can get on board with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think like a lot of people think that to be like more sustainable, it means you have to like give up things and you have to make sacrifices, but I don't necessarily think that's always true. Like I think a lot of times it's actually a quality of life add in many situations. So
definitely.
Of course, there are different ways to go about things, but it can be done, I think. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, Chris, I won't take up too much more of your time. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for
having me. It's great
having
hearing about your book.
Yeah, of course.